Now I will welcome our first presenter to come here and take us through the first presentation, which touches on what to eat, which touches on nutrition. Because we are talking about food systems, and when we talk about food systems, is what we eat. So it's good to get that understanding from nutrition perspective. So, karibu sana. And to our online participants, thank you again for being available today. I hope you are following the conversation, and indeed it's useful. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Good morning. We have to be lively so that we encourage our online participants that we are here. My name is Masi Nyangaresi. I'm a student at Amref International University, pursuing a master's in public health with a bias in epidemiology and public health nutrition. Thank you for the opportunity to do a presentation to you today. I decided to entitle my presentation Sustainable Diets, though I'm supposed to talk about proteins. We can't run away from our diets. Sustainable diets means that these are the diets that gives us food, that ensure food and nutrition security while still being cognizant of our environment, and they keep the resources for our future generation, that we don't eat today and we finish everything, that the children we have today and the children of our children, they will not find the resources to produce foods for them. So I'll take us through an overview of proteins. Proteins, they are crucial for our sustenance, for all forms of our life. It's a building block of the muscles, the cartilage, the bones, and they are critical for growth, repair, and the replacement of body tissues. It also forms a part of the enzymes, the hormone, and the antibodies. We know that all these things, the role of the enzyme, the hormone, and the antibodies in our bodies, and they also help in the maintenance of homeostasis, and they also make our immune system to function properly. They function as regulators of coagulation, fission, fluids, and acid-base balance. They serve as energy source in absence of carbohydrates and the lipids. Actually, this is the reason why when somebody is starving, you find they start to lose weight. Reason being, you're not getting enough carbohydrates to replenish your energy, so then the body reverts back to its muscles. A gram of protein gives us 4 kilocalories, the same as carbohydrates. But for lipids, I think they give a bit higher number of calories, 9 kilocalories per gram of lipids. What are the protein requirements? How much protein do we need? For a healthy normal person, per day, you're supposed to eat 0.8 grams per kg per body weight. That is saying, if you're weighing 100 grams, 100 kg, then per day you should be consuming 80 grams of proteins, not in one sitting per day. As we have different categories of people, and their protein requirement is different. For example, for pregnant and lactating women, apart from giving them 0.8 grams per kg per body weight, we add 10 to 15 grams to them to cater for the extra person. For lactating women, they are breastfeeding. For pregnant women, they are carrying a fetus. So we need to cater for that. So then we give them an extra of 10 to 15 grams of protein. We have other special groups. For infants who are below 6 years, below 6 months, their requirement is a bit higher. We allow them 2.2 grams per kg per body weight. This is because they are growing. The cell division is very high, so then we need to support that. That is why we allow them 2.2 grams per kg per body weight. For infants who are between 6 months and 1 year, we give them 1.6 grams per kg per body weight. This is because after 6 months, we expect an infant to double his birth weight. And then after that, the growth kind of stabilizes. So then we reduce the allowance of protein to 1.6 per kg per body weight. For children between 1 to 6 years, we allow them 1.2 grams per kg per body weight. For children between 6 to 14 years, we give them 1 grams per kg per body weight. And out of the total calories that our body requires, 10 to 15% of it should come from proteins. We have 2 types of protein sources. We have the animal sources and we have the plant sources. The animal sources, we say they are of high biological value because of the easiness at which our body takes it up, and it also has all the 9 essential amino acids. An example of plant protein, we have chicken, we have pork, meat, dairy, fish, egg, and all other products that are derived from the animals. Majority of the plant protein, they lack 1 or more amino acids except soy, which has all the 9 essential amino acids. But from yesterday's presenters, you heard them saying a majority of the soy that is grown in the world, it's used to feed animals. And apparently we've said it's the only plant protein that has complete amino acids. So there comes a gap. Plant sources, we have cereals, legumes, pulses, nuts, and seeds. Soy protein has sufficient amounts of amino acids and nuts. And nuts contain 75% of these amino acids. So when we grading proteins from plant sources, soy ranks high at 100%, containing all the essential amino acids. Nuts come in next. They have 75% of all the essential amino acids. That is a graphical presentation of what I've talked about. We have mushrooms, we have beans, we have insects, we have beef, we have a whole variety of the plant sources. We have eggs. We have fish, and then we have the daily products. So what has been the trends when it comes to protein consumption? Globally, initially we said that the calories that come from proteins, they should be between 10 to 15. But globally, we're seeing this range surpassing the 15% higher limit that it should. But as my presenter said from yesterday, when you look at the averages, you think we're doing very well when it comes to protein consumption. But we have a problem when it comes to distribution. You will find a certain portion of our population taking a large chunk of proteins, while another portion of our population, they don't consume enough protein, that leading to all forms of malnutrition that we have. We have overnutrition and we have undernutrition. So globally, protein consumption has increased from 68 grams, that was in 2009, to 78.2 grams, that was in 2015. In 2009, protein intake from animal sources, it ranged between 10 to 58 grams per day, while that one from plant, it ranged from 32 to 45 grams per day. So you can see people tend to eat more protein from animal compared to plants. The average intake from animal sources was 33% per day, while that one from plant sources was 29.1 grams per day. Data from 2017 showed that Americans, they consume 150 to 200% above what is recommended to be consumed per day. The total protein intake in Africa is also increasing. From 1990 to 2027, it increased by 19%. The intake of animal source protein has increased with increase in income and urbanization. As one of us said from yesterday, that when we get job, we get a better income and urbanization, we tend to compensate what we didn't eat when we were growing up. So in Nairobi, the mean energy intake from protein, it's 14.1, and the intake is above, and the intake above 15% were reported in close half of the population where the study was carried out. The animal protein, they collectively contributed to 36% of protein intake, while the plant accounts for 10.7%. So you can still see people preferring consumption of proteins from the animal sources as in compared to the plant sources. And still, even from the low income household, they spend 38% of their weekly expenditure on animal source protein. So what are the health impacts of animal source protein? From research, we have the 10 leading causes of death globally. And among the 10 leading causes of death globally, 7 of those leading causes, they are diet associated, they are diet related. And the 74% of all the deaths that come from NCD, they are diet related. NCD means non-communicable diseases. And then we're saying foods associated with climate and environmental health are generally associated with improved health, but not always. So we're saying the animal source protein, it constitutes high calories, fats, and sodium diets. This contributes to development of non-communicable diseases. So as we continue consuming these large amounts of the animal protein, the non-communicable diseases mortality and the morbidity pattern also increases. This high burden, it leads, we need to deal with the mortality and the morbidity that is accompanied with the non-communicable diseases. So then we find our government will be spending more in coming up with the interventions to deal with this morbidity and the mortality. That is in terms of the medical intervention and the treatment. The non-communicable diseases, they demand a higher budget. That we are shifting the financial and the human capital that could be allocated to other aspects of public health. What is the impact of that on our environment? From yesterday, we were told that the intensive animal production, they contribute to the environmental destruction. This is from the effect of the greenhouse gas emissions, and it leads to nutrient pollution and the water use. In 2009, animal source protein production, it accounted for 75% of the agricultural land and 30% of the agriculture-related greenhouse gas emission. It currently accounts for 14 to 51% of greenhouse gas emission. Up to 7% of the land that is cultivated, tilled, it produces feeds that are fed to the animals. Use of land for animal pasture and feed production contribute to soil erosion due to overgrazing and monoculture. Animal production requires 100 times more water than crop production. And I presented that in a graphical presentation. You can see that out of the land that is tilled in the US, 83% of that land that is tilled, it produces plants that make the animal feed. And a total amount of 58% of the agricultural greenhouse gas emission. But the paradox is, despite us using 83% of the cultivated land to produce feeds for these animals, we only get 18% of calories from those animals that we're feeding from the 83% of our portion of land. So what are the alternatives? We have the plant-based alternative proteins. We can do plant burgers, we can do meat, we can do almond, oat and soy milk. We have beans and nuts. We have fungi-based alternative proteins like mushrooms. We have insects like crickets, termites, ants, locusts, and beetles. I have a photo there. We have the mushrooms, we have the insects, we have the plant, a variety, and we have the products that we can be able to derive from the plant sources, which almost mimic the product of the animals. I have labeled my last option, laboratory grown meat, in red because it's an option we can explore, but it needs a lot of research to go into it. We have a number of guiding principles for a sustainable diet. We can eat less meat and dairy. We can achieve this by replacing the animal protein with healthy vegetable protein like beans, lentils, and nuts. We can emphasize on sustainable produced animal foods. That is by ensuring that the animal products that we eat, they are of high welfare. We can do moderate portions of daily. That is by reducing the amount of animal products that we eat. We can also choose sustainable sources, including the seafood. Another principle is we eat fewer high-processed food. This is by eating less sugar and salt. We do home-cooked meals more often. We do less fast food, and we do less processed and less packaging. I have an example of a plate there. It's a health plate, but I'm not sure how many of us will be comfortable with it. Another guiding principle is we consume more whole grain, vegetable, legumes, and nuts. This is by choosing health plant proteins. We choose a variety of whole grain to reduce reliance on staples. We purchase local produced in season. If it's fruits, we eat the fruits that are on season. If it's legume, we eat the legumes that are on season. And then we focus on diversity and variety. A while ago, we used to know there were only 3 food groups. Those were protein, carbohydrates, and lipids. But as we're talking now, the nutrition guideline, they have up to 14 food groups. They've really broken them down so that they encourage diversity and variety. That way, then you're able to acquire all the nutrients that our body requires. And then we can also reduce waste. Actually, worldwide, 40% of the food that we produce, it go to waste across the food chain, all the way from the farmer up to the market, up to our tables. We serve what we can't finish, so it goes to waste. So if we reduce that, then we'll be enhancing sustainable diets. What are the public health benefits of consuming plant proteins? It contributes to the physical health. It also contributes to the environmental health. We said plants, they are a source of healthy nutrients. It has carbohydrates, it has amino acids, fiber, minerals, vitamins, antioxidants, which are very important when it comes to making of our immunity and the prevention and treatment of the communicable diseases and chronic diseases. Although insufficient in some essential amino acids, consumption of a variety of these sources will be sufficient in meeting the dietary protein needs. We said earlier that the plant proteins, they lack one or more essential amino acids. But when we combine foods, we call that food complementation, then you find an amino acid that is lacking in one plant food, it's available in the other. For example, when you eat rice and a legume, you find they complement one another and make a complete protein. We have other sources like pseudo cereals, such as amaranth. They contain amino acid lysine, which cereals are deficient in. So when you eat your cereal and you mix it with amaranth, then you find you have a complete amino acid. We have nuts, grains, and seeds. They contain sufficient amount of methionine and cysteine, which is limited in legumes. We have soybean, which is sufficient in all amino acids. How does it contribute to our environment? When you compare with the animal production, Crop agriculture emit very low amount of greenhouse gases. That is one. Crops have low water and low land use compared with what animal production would require. So when we eat a lot of crops, then we enhancing diversification, which enhances biodiversity. Biodiversity, it reduces instances of environmentally transmitted diseases, in that when you do crop rotation, then you get to prevent some diseases. Instead of going for a pesticide, the plant themselves act as pesticide in their own way. So these properties make the consumption of plant proteins beneficial to the physical and environmental health. They reduce the burden on the public health. Got a few words there to define, and then we'll move to the next slide. We have a vegan. A vegan is somebody who doesn't eat meat and animal product. He doesn't eat anything associated with animals. We have lacto-ovo-vegetarian. This is somebody who does not eat meat, but he eats meat products. I mean the animal products. We have a pescatarian. This is somebody who eats only white meat and the animal products. So he eliminates red meat from his diet. We have a low food chain. This is when you tend to eat more of plants. So I have a graph there. The first bar, that is the baseline. As at 2050, if we continue consuming the consumption trends that we're doing now, that is the amount of carbon that will be emitted. So then we will not be able to achieve the reduction of carbon dioxide emission as envisioned. And you can see the culprit, it's the red meat that is contributing a larger portion of that. When we do meatless days means if we have 7 days in a week, you can say maybe a day or 2 days in a week, you're not touching anything that is meat. So then you see we reduce the amount of carbon emission in that much compared to the trends that we have now. If we say we do low red meat, like you're eating your meat, but you reduce the amount, that is how much you will be able to reduce the carbon emission. When we look at lacto-ovo-vegetarian, we said these are the people who don't eat meat, but they do the animal product. That is how much carbon emission we'll be able to reduce. When we do a pescatarian diet, it again comes down to that much. We have 2/3 vegan. 2/3 vegan, it also means it does red meat, but a third of what he's supposed to eat. We reduce it to that much. Low food chain, meaning you feed basically on the plants, insects, and fung. That is how much we will reduce it. And if we go vegan, that is how much carbon we will be able to reduce. Yeah, my summary, globally, the consumption of protein, especially animal-based, has been increasing globally since mid-1900. This has caused increase in the burden of diseases and climate change. We've discussed that. Intensive livestock production has increased zoonotic, foodborne, chemical-related diseases, and antimicrobial resistance. It has caused environmental degradation through greenhouse gas emission, increased water and land use, and reduction of biodiversity. Plant protein consumption has many health benefits, like maintenance of cardiovascular, renal, immune, and muscle health. Replacement of animal protein with plant protein would unburden the health systems and improve health. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that nice presentation. from nutrition perspective, from diet perspective. It struck me I need to eat 0.8 kilograms per kg per body weight. Just trying to look at myself.
How much are you weighing?
I think the last time I checked, I was 84, but I think I might have added a bit. So that has been a while. I think like six months ago or so.
We need to calculate your protein allowance, and we start from break and lunch.
She's talking, huh?
I'm saying, so we need to calculate how much protein you should be taking in a day. 0.8 times 84, we get what? 6.64, thereabout. And you spread it the whole day from the milk that you take in your tea.
Oh, from milk?
All the proteins that you need in a day.
Okay. Okay, nice. These are grams, right?
Yes.
So how many grams again?
64.
64 grams?
Yes.
The whole day?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. 64 grams.
It is science that says, I didn't do the recommendation. I only said what is there in our guidelines, in WHO guideline.
Okay. The mic.
We can all get how much we should be eating. We start the talk from here. Your kgs times 0.8. That is for a health person. But if you have other health conditions, there are those that are dictates that we add to you, and there are those that dictates that we reduce your grams.
Okay, I see everyone is holding his phone trying to calculate how many grams he needs to eat. So, but looking at who is here, I think I'm the one who needs most of the protein, 64 grams in a day. How much does an egg weigh? Out of curiosity. An egg is 40 grams. 40 to 50 grams. So in short, I should only take 1.5 egg a day, and I'm done. No tea, no nothing, no any other protein. Black tea.
You already depleted your protein allowance.
Okay, out of curiosity, you mentioned there are 14 groups of foods, right?
Food groups, yes.
I've grown to know carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, minerals, right? Maybe you can touch on the other 10, maybe, to the extent that you're able to, yeah?
Not sure if I can reach 10, but from the slide that is there, I have a number, I have an egg, it forms a food group, I have fish, those are 2, dairy product, those are 3, I have beef, those are 4, I have legumes, 5, nuts, 6, we have fruits, 7, vegetables, and vegetables we've split them into dark green, yellow vegetables, so that we make a variety, so that you don't say I've eaten vegetables and you only eat cabbage. We've really tried to separate them so that we enhance diversity and a variety. So when we go to carbohydrates, we have cereals, we have roots, we have tubers. How many?
I lost the count anyway, but at least I can tell.
You got 13. Yeah, so I'm sharp.
I can tell. So you mentioned about dark green
Vegetables, yes.
And yellow vegetables?
Yellow vegetables.
What is the difference between the two?
Dark green vegetables, a majority of us, we don't like them. The spinach, the managu, the saga, basically the traditional vegetables,
Okay.
we don't seem to consume them. But when you know it's a group, you will consume them. And they are very rich in iron, and the other one are very rich in vitamin A.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. I'm still trying to debate 64 grams of mine. But anyway, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, talking about our diets. And I believe it's a conversation each one of us would like to be engaged in, because it's what we eat. It's what we are going to have now in our tea break, in our lunch, in our dinner. Yes, all that. So I would like to welcome questions. I'll start with those who are physically here. So please give comments, seek clarification, ask a question that you might have. Me have mine. At least I know 64 grams of proteins per day. So I'm happy to hear what are your thoughts. Thank you. So as you start, again, just mention your name, where you are coming from, so that she's able to respond to you specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercy, for such an interesting conversation or presentation. My name is Dr. Paul Kangede from KTN News. I have a comment and a question. My question is, for the plant-based protein, is the nutritional value affected by the cooking method or how it is cooked? Again, is the nutritional value affected also by how many vegetables you may mix? Now I am biased towards vegetables when I'm asking about the cooking method. And then someone said that when you want to cook, say, vegetables, you're supposed to consume maybe one at a time, so that then you may boil some water. The vegetables are already chopped. You place the vegetables in the water for some time, say 10 minutes, and then the ingredients are ready cooking. Then you just cook the vegetables for a short time, so that then they retain their nutritional value. I don't know if you agree with that, or what is your school of thought? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. for that question. Any other person? Okay.
Yes, Dennis Kipkorir, Farming Systems Kenya. We were talking about 64 grams for Dr. Muinde. But then when we buy meat, we buy for the whole family. Now, in a family of mine, I have 2 kids. My wife could be pregnant or not. But then in layman's language, how much of meat should I buy by a family of 3, for example? And for me to get the 8 grams per kg, how much of meat will give me 8 grams of protein? I don't think the whole meat is protein. There's a lot of fiber and things like that. And for soybeans, I once worked in a factory, and the way it was cooked for long. I don't know if it affects availability of the proteins. There is a discussion around how it should be cooked, and it should be cooked for quite a long time or under high temperatures. And again, as you answer that, how much of soybean should I cook per meal?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Just to add to soybeans cooking, we tend to use pressure cookers so that we have our food be ready quick. Does that destroy the protein component in it? I think that's what you are referring to. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Just a clarification Oh, I'm Dr. Willis Mboya. I'm coming from Busia. I work with the national government. When you're clarifying about the duration of preparing meals, touch on how the duration when you're preparing meat will affect the quality of the protein when you're responding to the one that on plants or vegetables.
Okay. Good one. Thank you, Dr. for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Mercy, for your amazing presentation. We have really learnt a lot. So mine is on the welfare of vegetables. Just the way we are promoting high animal welfare because of the problems of toxins in our meat, residues, and all the issues that we have. We also facing the same problem with our vegetables in this country. A lot of pesticides are used, a lot of herbicides, and also the low quality manure used to grow them. I get scared of eating vegetables because of the issues that come through. I also have an issue with H. pylori, which I tend to get from vegetables. So what are your recommendations, Dr. Vegetables?
Okay. Any more from this side? Okay, yeah, thank you. I hope, Mercy, you are noting those questions. Good.
Thank you, Mercy, for your presentation. This is Eunice from Anna. 2 questions. One, you talked about you've talked about seasons, eh? And we know that we have high seasons and low seasons. So what do we do when we are in low seasons where we do not have anything in season that we can depend on for our nutrition? Number 2, you've talked about replacing animal protein with insects. I don't know if that is per region where these insects are found. And maybe another thing, we don't want to find ourselves again in factory farming for insects to replace protein. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, one more here.
Good morning. My name is Betty, and thank you very much, Mercy, for that presentation. You have said protein consumption has been increasing over the years. In this age of information, why would we be having such a kind of trend, yet we should be knowing better? And yeah, I think that. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Malemba from People Daily newspaper. So my question is, Kenya and meat are 2 inseparable things. So, Dr. Mercy, how can we change the culture of meat consumption in Kenya? Because I know the MC, I know per city maybe you take half a kg, and it's something that it's So how can we tell Kenyans that they should consume less meat? How can we adopt that culture? Thank you.
Yes, I think I'll ask Mercy to respond to those questions. And point of clarification following that, will I still be strong if I eat 64 grams of protein every day? Yeah? Will I still be contributing strong? Yeah.
That is well known from even the Bible. You remember Daniel? He said, exclude me from the king's diet. And after a number of days, he was still healthy. I'll start with the easiest of the easiest. How can we change the culture of overconsumption of meat? A while ago, there was something that came up about the quail eggs. You remember? The quail eggs, you remember? I don't know who started that. Probably he may be the best person to give this message so that he coins it the way he did to the consumption of the quail eggs so that Kenyans can be able to pick it up the way they did it to the quail eggs. But I've read a number of researches, and when you want people to change, actually in that particular study, when people were asked what might make you change your diet, 83% of them said they'll opt to change their diet if the diet they are changing to will affect their health status. So as we're moving out from here, or whoever will be taking the next step as the discussion advances, we need to package this message in a way that it will be palatable to the people that we're going to communicate to. Remember, when we're talking about behavior change, we are all at different levels. So different people should be targeted differently on the level where they are. So message packaging is very important and very key for us to realize that change of meat overconsumption. Why are we observing increased trend in consumption of animal protein? I think we talked about increase of income and urbanization. We said when we were growing up, a number of us, we used to eat meat end month only. Either Christmas or end month. Those of us who come from the region where it is grown, end month ndo ilikuwa payday ya mshahara ya chai. So that is when we used to eat meat. And some during the Christmas. So now that I have a salary of a 6-figure, and you want to tell me I continue eating vegetables? We want to compensate, but we need the right message to go out to tell these people that, hey, you're harming yourself. Because after some time now you come to my clinic, I'll tell you, you don't eat this, you don't eat this, you don't eat this, when you can comfortably afford that. So moderation is very important, and messaging of whatever that is going out is very key. Question 1. I was making fun with Patrick today in the morning. I told him, if you tell me to talk nutrition in 2 minutes, I will. If you give me 30 minutes, I will. If you give me a day, I will. If you give me a week, I'll still keep on talking about nutrition. So I only did a very small bit of it. We've not looked at the preparation of our foods and how it affects the nutrients. We didn't talk about that. But indeed, the cooking method affects the nutrients. It all depends. You may have food, but how you consume it and how you prepare it determine how much goes into your body. So I'll not touch about that. I'll not touch about the methods of cooking. I'll not touch about how appropriate we should prepare our food. I'll not talk about the combination of food, that if you eat this and this, you go null and void, because now the nutrients find themselves and your body is not able to absorb any. Distribution, how much meat per family? When I'm talking about 0.8 actually, we may not be able to count grams per se, but I wanted to bring out that what we're eating is too far much excess of what we should be consuming. So moderation is key. Soy and how it should be prepared. I said I'll not touch on food preparation. That is a whole topic of food preparation and safety and all that. Yeah, I understand that soy has flavonoids, which are anti-nutrients. They need to be prepared in a way that those anti-nutrients are removed. So I'll not touch much on that. Protein component. Actually, when we cook meat, depending on the method that we use to cook meat, the proteins are not affected. But depending on the method that we use to prepare meat, especially nyama choma, there is a chemical that is activated which is associated to carcinogen. again, that is a whole discussion on that. So yes, cooking method affect the nutrients, but when it comes to protein remain the same. They are not really affected unless they are overcooked, which then we denature the proteins. Welfare of our vegetables, we're talking from the perspective of food systems. It's not something it's not a one-man show. We need to involve all the key stakeholders. Actually, I was looking at another article, and somebody is saying when you're consuming spinach, I think it was in India, that when they are consuming spinach, they are consuming more pesticides than the iron they should be enjoying from the spinach that they are consuming. So we need to involve all the key stakeholders when it comes to food system, so that each of them know their role and how best we can be able to produce high welfare foods, now not high welfare animal, so that we benefit all around. An alternative way, you can do a kitchen garden. That is what we are advocating for. We have high seasons and low seasons of food, that is for sure. But then we have to enhance our food chain, so that preservation comes in handy. When we have a high season for a particular food, we preserve it so that it can be used when we are in the low season. Alternatively, seasons are not the same across Kenya, so if a particular food is of season elsewhere, so then we can enhance distribution so that food is evenly distributed across the country. Again, how can we make sure that the insect production doesn't result into industry farming? Again, as I said earlier, not everybody is consuming insect. I think this is regional. Anthropologists talk about food acceptance in our culture. So depending on where we come from, then we can promote a particular insect where it's edible and accepted. Yeah, did I leave any concern? I think I addressed all of them.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Masi, and acknowledge that you have been able to respond to what has been asked here. And again, we have a few more questions from our online participants. Thank you for those who have raised those questions. So I'll read them to you. Two are from Duncan Barada. And the first question is, how many grams do an underweight person recommend to eat to gain weight? I think you saw me in the camera. You saw my size. So he's asking, how many grams do an underweight person recommend to eat to gain weight? Like, how many grams do you recommend for somebody who is underweight to eat so that he or she can gain weight? Not like Patrick who is trying to lose weight. Then another one is, good morning, nice presentation, Dr. Mercy. In terms of health issues, between red meat and white meat, which is the best source of protein that is safer to the consumer? Okay, between white meat and red meat, which is best protein source that is safer to the consumer? Then again from Duncan, how many eggs should a person consume per day? Okay. Then there's two questions from Vyashamba, Africa. Great presentation, Mercy. You recommend more home-cooked foods. What is your comment on the foods being cooked in supermarkets? Okay, you recommend more home-cooked foods. What is your comment on the foods being cooked in supermarkets? I walk to Quickmart, I'll get food, Neighbors, Carrefour, whatever, they are cooking food. How do you recommend that? Second question from Vyashamba. Very interesting to note that 40% of foods go to waste globally. Is indeed that what we need to address in order to address the severe shortage and malnutrition that we see in some parts of the world? So she's asking, because most of the food, up to 40%, is lost because of food wastage. Is it good to address that so that we address the issue of severe shortage, food shortage, and malnutrition that is in the world? Then there's a final question from anonymous attendee. How do we make sure distribution chains of different food groups are available to all communities and people? I think from perspective of that attendee is that we don't have even distribution. How do we make sure there's that even distribution of food to all communities and people across the globe? Thank you. People are still not believing this body has to eat 1.5 eggs in a day. I try to address that.
Interesting indeed. How much should an underweight person eat to gain weight? I can't just stand here and say a figure, but we have a number of issues that we should consider before we recommend any. Now you're taking me back to the clinical part of nutrition. I said I'm a public health nutritionist, but I'll try to address that, though I will not give you an exact figure. One, we will have to consider your physiological status. Two, a physiological status, I mean, are you pregnant, are you sick? How are you as at the moment that we're talking? What are your physical activities? What do you indulge in your day-to-day basis? Three, have you been underweight? What occasioned the underweight? Have you been underweight continuously? Or it's something that triggered the underweight to come in? And what is your sex? Are you a male? Are you female? So then now you will see it from that perspective. And of course, I'll have to look at your food security status. What food are you able to access? So from that perspective, then I'll be able to recommend a figure, or will be able to forge a meal plan that will enable you gain weight. And of course, I'll have to know your current weight, and we calculate your BMI, as in what should be your ideal body weight from the body mass index that we'll have calculated. So it's a whole process that I can't just stand here and say this figure. White meat, red meat, well, which one among the two is the best? We have different types of diet. We have what we call DASH diet. We have Mediterranean diet. And we have the diet that we use here in Kenya. Mediterranean diet, it's associated to healthier lifestyle, and it's recommended in a majority of people who have chronic diseases. Mediterranean diet advocates for consumption of more white meat, less red meat, and a lot of plant proteins, that is nuts, legumes, peas, and beans. And it has proven to promote good health. How many eggs should one consume per day? I'll not say definitely one. Or you eat 2 and you finish your protein allowances per day. But moderation is very important since we have different categories of moderation, and variety is very important. We have a number of protein sources, the way I've displayed them here. So if you can spread them across the sources, the better, so that you benefit from different nutrients that are found in different foods. What is my take on the supermarket foods? I'll not comment, but I'll say homemade food is better because you understand the source, you understand the method of cooking, and you do it to the moderation. You know how much oil you should use to cook, how much salt you should use to cook, no preservatives, no eating food that has stayed in the fridge for 1,007 days. So I'll still say home cooked food, but I remain silent on the supermarket food. Let me give you a story. I have a friend, them the days. One, he had a daily animals. They used to produce a lot of milk. So he'll tell me, I've spent a lot of money to produce this milk. So when I not get customers, I'll not throw this milk away. So I'll use formalin, and the milk will stand there for a number of weeks to sell. I have a close friend who also has a butchery. The meat that remains from the display, after 2 to 3 days, it will go to the back hotel and it will be cooked there for you to go and grab it and eat. So to ensure safety of the food that you're eating, I still insist, cook your food if you're able to. Yeah, so somebody is asking about won't we be addressing wastage? So yes, we've been talking about from yesterday's speakers, and today I have talked about distribution. We have a problem of distribution. For example, have a look at our country now. We have people dying in Northeastern because of hunger. But some of us, we manage to cook and throw away some food. When you go to some farmers somewhere, they produced a lot of skuma wiki, a lot of cabbages, a lot of tomatoes, and they don't have market to sell that. So that ends where? Wastage. So there need to be a lot of streamlining across the food chain. Dr. Yamo yesterday portrayed a number of elements and actors across the food chain. They all need to come together and address this. A number of researchers have said that we don't have a problem of food as at now. The problem is distribution. That where food is produced, that food lacks mechanism to be transported and distributed to the people who need to eat it. How to ensure heaven distribution? I can say it's the collaboration, multi-sectorial collaboration across the actors that Dr. Yamo talked about yesterday, not a one-man show.
Okay, thank you so much, Mercy, for that. Yes, we have 2 more, again from Vyashamba, Africa. And it goes like this. I'm curious, if soya is sufficient in all nutrients, why are we not promoting it aggressively instead of feeding it to the animals? Okay? The second question is, in conclusion, is pork white or red meat? Before you come, I'll try to respond because, like the first question, we did discuss that yesterday, basing our arguments to what is happening in Brazil. As you know, there's a lot of deforestation happening in Brazil to create space for production of grains. And Brazil not only leading in production of animal protein, specifically beef, it is also leading in exporting cereals intended to feed animals in Europe. And because of that, there's a lot of deforestation happening there. And yesterday's presentation by Dr. Daniel from IRRI indicated that if you give an animal 100 kilograms of soybeans, you're going to get from that animal, conversion rate is not so good. Ruminants, they don't convert cereals efficiently as monogastric. Monogastric animals, which are one-stomached, like us humans. So ruminants, they tend to be so efficient in digesting grains, cereals, including soybeans. So most of it is wasted. So what you end up getting is quite less than what you have given that animal. So the argument is, instead of using instead of feeding what is edible to humans to animals, so that you consume it through animals, we need to go ahead and feed those plant-based proteins, soybeans directly, because we are better placed to consume them efficiently and to digest them efficiently. In conclusion, is pork white or red meat? Good question. It happens that I'm a vet. Maybe some of you don't know. This is one of the things that we used to have a big discussion. And as you'll imagine, there's been food scandals since long time ago. Dr. Amo keeps on talking about food scandal, and that is one of it. People thinking pork is white meat, which is not the case. And that started very early, I think in 1970s, 1980s. I think there was a lot of marketing for pork products. And that's when people who cook culinary traditions have always classified pork as white meat, which is not the case. Meat is classified white or red, depending on the level of myoglobin in it. Myoglobin is a protein that transports oxygen to our muscles, okay? And that level is what determines that classification. And because if you look at pork, it appears a little bit pale, and again, when you cook it, it's also pale. So you assume, this is white meat. But that's not the case. If you compare myoglobin levels in pork to that in chicken and fish, they are quite different. So pork is the red meat and not white meat. But again, Mercy, those are your questions, so you can give addition into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. I think now we've converted you to a nutritionist. You correctly answered my two last questions. Yes, pork is a red meat because of the level of myoglobin in it, and it's classified as a livestock, not as a chicken or fish, which is a bird, and the other one it's a sea animal.
Okay, a clap for Mercy. Yes, thank you so much, Mercy, for taking us through our diets. I'll just be watching you now at lunchtime to see how you'll be behaving over there when you're taking our lunch. I think I'll be the first one, not the very last one, because I'm reference point to this discussion. And I can imagine media guys here give an example, like person X, who is 84 kgs, needs to consume 64 grams in a day. Any out of our later note. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, our online participants. We are going to have a short break of 15 minutes to at least stretch and have a cup of tea. Then we will be back after 15 minutes so that we can have our next presentation. To our online participants, thank you so much for keeping it here. Just to notify you, we'll be breaking for a short while and we'll be back. Exactly, what time is it? Yeah? 10:40. No, it's 10:40. No, it's 10:40. Yeah, so we'll be back at 11. Let's get back here at 11. Thank you. Okay, welcome back to our second presentation today. We'll be talking about policy and legal work surrounding global food systems, specifically animal production and food security. That will be presented by Judy Murithi, who works with Bretta Green. And again, just to alert our online participants, we are going to start our second session. Thank you, and to you, Judy.
Thank you. I'm Judy Murithi. I work with Bretta Green International. Bretta Green is a policy think tank which deals with environment, intersection between environment, people, and animals. And its major area of focus is how do we develop food systems that are sustainable and environmentally friendly. And the area of focus is Africa. They're currently focusing on Africa and trying to come up with ways for which we can continually have systems that are mitigating the effects of climate change. Okay? Yeah, so the presentation will be brief because everyone has been saying most of the things that I was supposed to say. So the outline we'll talk about the production itself, the food insecurity, the framework itself, and then we talk about now where are we and where are we headed. Okay? And definitely we know animals in Africa, it plays a very big role. Animal production and agriculture generally plays a very big role in the economic aspects of Africa. And that's why every state in Africa has been working hand in hand to improve their agricultural practices and more specifically the livestock. Okay? As Dr. Ebu has mentioned the first time, Africa has been really trying to increase the intake of protein owing to their problems of food insecurity. We know that Africa has the biggest level of child stunting and growth, and that is because of the unavailability of food. And you know the protein option is always the best option because it helps with the development itself of the people, okay? And so if we feed the pregnant women or the lactating women well, then we are guaranteed to have a healthier population, okay? And so as we gear on towards the vision 2030, 2050, or even the next 100 years, the Africa, through AU-IBA, which has been very instrumental in terms of coming up with great policies for agriculture, with the animal resource aspect of it, they've been gearing towards most projects that are supposed to be increasing in the availability of the animal projects, okay? Animal products. And so they are really striving to transform the sector by having a sustainable intensification strategy that makes investments in technology, agriculture, and everything else. Okay? Okay, hope that's clear. And so, and as we go through the policies, we'll notice that every policy done by Africa itself, through the African Union, we have IGAD, we have all these agricultural institutions in Africa. We'll see that they are really talking about the increase in quality, and everyone is really towards how can we increase the output that we have right now to help in the next few years. Okay, we have the Africa agenda. The first one is the Africa agenda, and you see Africa has very untapped resources. We have the majority people in Africa are mostly pastoralists, you know that. And so their resource, the natural resource, has not been tapped in correctly. And so we have the Africa Agenda, which seeks to incorporate every person who are in the sector to come up with ways for which they can improve their economic, improve their economic, their money, definitely the money, and then the food. And so it's supposed to come up with a paradigm shift in development and approaches that build on the current economic prospects for fast track growth trajectories. In Africa, as a developing country, and the easiest low-hanging fruit is through agriculture and animal production. And also, and all these frameworks build on the AU IBA, which is the overseer of all the animal resource production in Africa. And so also enforces the animal welfare. And also, even before I forget, the AU IBA has the animal welfare strategy of Africa, which has been very instrumental in gearing towards all these negotiations in all tables around Africa. Okay? Then you have the NEPAD, and so this one, the NEPAD, was spearheaded by African leaders to address the critical challenges facing the continent. And then it puts Africa in a very unique position for which they can take full control of the development agenda, which includes agriculture and food security as the main elements of their projects, okay? And then so with this one, it has 4 pillars, of which the strongest first pillar is agriculture and production, okay? And then we have the African Union Tool for Inclusion of Livestock, the CADP. Compact and investment plans. You see, so all these, okay, actually all of them talk about the same thing, but they were all developed over different regions, or rather different meetings and different times different times of which African leaders. And so we will see that in each and every one of them, we have the Abuja Food Security Declaration, which now had the livestock development strategy for Africa. So this one also, it was supposed to increase the level of trade towards Africa, okay? And see if Kenya can produce maybe cows, what can Tanzania produce, and all these things, okay? And so its vision is to have a competitive and sustainable livestock sector that significantly contributes to a prosperous Africa, while its goal is to transform the African livestock sector for enhanced socio-economic development and equitable growth, you see. So in everything that you're doing in terms of the increase of production, it has to be very sustainable and equitable. Equitable meaning that every person has access. We have countries which, in our countries, we have the gap. The very rich people and the very poor people. So how can we bridge that gap? All these things that I'm talking about will come into perspective as we proceed with our presentation. And then also we have the regional frameworks, which is the COMESA, East African Community Treaties, yeah? The ECOWAS for East Africa, IGAD, SADC, and the UMA for Egypt. All these things, you can see from all these conventions and these meetings and the corporate conference of parties, they're being geared towards how do we increase. And now this brings in the one thing that we've noticed in all these conventions and frameworks is that we are increasing quality. We are increasing the quantity, but the question is the quality up to standard? Do we have welfare standards that are in a way that we can say that all the animals that are under the 5 freedoms? We all know about the 5 freedoms, right? And so we need to now start critiquing every policy document. We say that every country is supposed to use these policy documents to spearhead their own policies in their country. And so if you look at Kenya, do we think that we are up to standard? We have the Animal Cruelty Act, okay? When it talks of animal production, do we think it satisfies the 5 freedoms? Does it comply? And that's the question we're supposed to be asking ourselves as the animal welfare people. And we need to critique and come up very strong and say that we need to have all these policies that are geared towards, because we look at all these conventions, they're making animals seem like commodities rather than commodifying the product rather than making it to be in a very humane way for sustainability. We know that we have the One Welfare principle, which talks about how we treat animals is directly reflects on our public health. Okay, so this is what you're supposed to be doing in policy. And policy, policy connects the bourgeoisie, the ruling the ruling people in a country and the community ourselves. So if we ourselves are already affected by the kind of rules and regulations that are passed on by these people, then we need to be critiquing these things correctly. Okay. And so now we talk about now having that in mind. Having understanding that we need to increase our production. So in Africa, do we think that we've gotten to a point where we can say that our agricultural sector is big enough for it is directly affecting the climatic society, rather that's a question we're asking ourselves. And from our studies we've seen from the past speakers that Africa has a carbon print, a very small carbon print, okay? But as we are right now, we still need to increase the amount of proteins that we're intaking, or rather the quantity of meat that we have. So what exactly are we supposed to do? So us as policymakers, what we're supposed to do is we try as hard as possible. We have a proactive kind of situation where we attack the thing before it comes, okay? Right now, as the professors will talk about, this professor here, he'll tell us the definition between what is animal intensification, what is large-scale farming, what is factory farming. All these things we need to understand them for us to have a better understanding of factory farming. Because still right now, with all these conventions, they're increasing, or rather they're trying to bringing activities like large-scale farming, okay? And so with this, so if we are trying to transition, because you can see we're trying to transition our systems to a way bigger industrialized situation. So then how can we incorporate standards, or rather steps that are going to be more mitigating and not reflect the westernized kind of animal production, okay? Okay, as you can see, the large-scale industrial animal agriculture is referred to as factory farming, which now implies which permits in subjugation injustice. Okay, we shared a photo, but anyway, okay, I'm so sorry about that. But there's a photo, you can see how a factory farm is. It's very mechanized, it has very many machines, for which even the animals are not even able to move. An animal is put in a very small cage, like a cow, and it's overfed lots of proteins and antibiotics for it to increase the growth. So a cow which takes maybe a year or 2 years, or 3 years to mature, it's not taking 8 months. You can imagine how it is. And so if we continually increase and make it such a process, that's when now we end up having all these problems that you're having. And so in Africa, do we think we've gotten to that point where we are in a situation where we have very many animals in one area, and then do not have free movement? So questions we're supposed to be asking ourselves. And so if the community or the world is trying to get us to a point where we're supposed to be increasing our quantity in animals, then what are we supposed to do as policymakers to ensure that we are able to get a system that is better for us, better for our environment, and better for our health, okay? And so we see, as the human population increases, then we need to have a transformative system for which all farming systems are made in a way that we increase our production and it be in an equitable, equitable. Okay, and so we've seen that large-scale farming accounts to extensive damage to the environment, public health, due to sustainable use of resources. You've had the nutritionists talking about how we are constantly using the soya beans to give the animals. And yet, we already suffering in terms of availability of food to the communities in Africa. So then, how can we change the mindset and not direct all these feeds to us? Also, the African Union has the livestock pastoralist strategy, which is supposed to come up with specific ways for which personally the Maasai, the Samburus, on how they've been rearing their cows to be incorporated into policy. And so these are the things are supposed to be incorporating in our laws moving forward. Okay? And then also it's quite unfortunate because now all African governments now are seeing large-scale farming as a net good because that's what they're being told by the international community. The international community is pumping lots of money, lots of money. We heard it from Dr. Yamo where he was talking about these international organization banks and they're continually pumping more money to Africa to come up with large factory farms, okay? And so we need to start critiquing this kind of farm-centric kind of situations. And then we say we as Africans, we have a way of rearing our animals. Then what you can do is maybe improve in terms of how maybe improving on technology, but not really outdoing everything that you've been doing for the last maybe 1,000 years, and then coming up with such degrading and sustainable agricultural practices. Okay. And then so Africa at this point, we are very vulnerable, and we are very likely to embrace these factory farms. This is one because of the assumptions. Because already, if you look at, yesterday we had the questions, we're talking about what are the advantages of the global north kind of systems, right? We could see there was something in terms of employment, there was accessibility, they were cheap, you see. So there's that assumption, but now the question is, that is what has happened in their country. Do we think all those advantages, as we said them yesterday, will reflect in Africa? And do we think that whatever environment that they have there, will it directly have the same effects in our country? So those are some of the assumptions that we need to study in our country, in Africa, and see if indeed we can have an effective system that promotes food security and does not have the environment. And then another one in terms of Africa is how much money is being pumped into the factory farms. Now, we've been talking about alternative proteins. Then, if we're supposed to be having alternative proteins, then how much is it to develop one burger, yani one pro-meat burger, and how much is it to damage the environment? We have to weigh both sides and see which is the best option, okay? And then also, the another vulnerability of Africa is that there is poor precision and awareness of the food and education of the importance of creating a global food system that is humane and sustainable. Like, nobody knows how it's supposed to look like. Nobody has come up with a system. Nobody has come up with a specific standard for which you should follow. And so if the world does not have that, then do we think as Africans we've gotten to a point where we have a specific standard for which you can follow? So I think that policymakers need to start to spearhead and make sure that we're able to put ourselves in a situation where we're able to have a system that is more humane and sustainable. And then another thing about Africa is that, yes, we have all these regional frameworks, and when we have now the recently assented to the UNEA Animal Welfare Resolution. But then, what's happening to the countries in Africa? Have we embraced the new animal welfare standards that have been continually developed in the world? You see, there's a disconnect. So even though, however much we have very good international laws that reflect the good animal welfare practices, and Kenya itself does not absorb them, then we get in a very awkward situation because now we cannot implement it in our country. However good international law is, it does not really affect our country if it does not adopt it. We know how we adopt the international conventions in our country. So we really need to start absorbing it and understanding. And then One Animal Protection has been working on the Animal Protection Index, which actually shows that specific aspect. So how has countries effectively adopted the international welfare principles under the frameworks? Okay. And then now we have, in Africa, definitely, we are poor, and we have to accept that we are really poor. So even the amount of money that we need is just to feed us. We just need to eat for another day. We need to eat for another month. So then, that's another vulnerability aspect of Africa. So if we are to gear and get money and then take it to other technologies, then it will be counterproductive. We have to, a well-fed country or a well-fed continent brings about better working environments, okay? Then conclusion. So there is need to unpack the assumptions on the efficiency of factory farms. First, there's a lot of research that we need to do in Kenya, in Africa generally. Like, we need to come up with specific research based with the Kenya narrative, African narrative, and with African situations. Because definitely, it might have worked in the global north, but now we literally work here. So we need to start having specific research, and extensive research, to show that why we do not need this kind of situation. And even though we don't need this kind of situation, then can we get another model that is going to work for Africa? So, and policy cannot come in a place where there is no effective research. So if the research is done by, we have JKUAT represented here, and if they're able to come up with a very good research that backs up whatever we're saying, then becomes quite easy for us to continue with the conversation. And also leads that we need to touch the growth drivers and impacts of factory farm operations in the global south. Like, we need to have specific people or specific personnel. We have vets here. We have to have a multidisciplinary kind of think tank, which is supposed to come up with specific ways. Let's not just adopt technologies as they are. And that's how, and that is how we are going to put Africa in a very good place for which it does not increase the carbon print in the world. Okay, recommendations, that's one. We need to continually engage African students, researchers, and professors. Definitely, when you're trying to advance specific things and technologies, we need to put everyone there. Where are the teachers? Where are the doctors? Where all sectors need to come down here and then we want to do this, Lord, let's do it. You saw about COVID. COVID was not only a medical calamity. It included the vets, the environmental practitioners, and researchers themselves. So we all need to have such kind of a broad framework to cover specific agenda and have specific alternatives for industrial agriculture, okay? And then also adopt a global intersectional approach to counter industrial livestock production, definitely, okay? Because now, if we are able to mirror the two, global south and global north, then what are we supposed to adopt? What are we not supposed to adopt? And so we need to have Africa advocacy efforts, okay? And it has to be we are Africa, we live in Africa. Let's have our own solutions. Let's have great Africans who are able to come up with specific solutions for Africa. And for that, then it becomes way easier for us to become competitive agriculturally and economically around the world, okay? And then also acknowledge and learn from indigenous forms of agriculture. Talk about the pastoralists. The pastoralists have been able to be there they've been here for a very long time. Their breeds are even able to adapt to the climate of Africa. Then we need to acknowledge them, bring them to the table, and then we all have a conversation. Let's not lock them out. Let them also come here, and then and remember, policy is all about the community themselves and everyone else. So let's include them 100%. And then recommendations, definitely, we need to have an African narrative, Africa-centric approach, that's one. Education on farmers, on welfare. Because see, I visited a couple of farms, like poultry farms, and then you'll see a farmer telling you, when you hear them talk, it's quite unfortunate because they'll be just talking about, I'm using this battery cage because it's giving me a lot of money. But then, when you ask about the welfare standard, they'll be like, okay, there's some disconnect in terms of welfare standards and practices. So then, where can we now start educating the farmers? And then they understand about the standards, and then we are able to have, because we empower the smallholder farms, it translates directly to the large farms, okay? Because the small farmer gets more money, gets a bigger farm, then makes another bigger farm, and then comes up with a big farm. And so how can we motivate and make all these things work together, okay? And then also, definitely, national governments need to develop animal welfare laws and policies. They need to incorporate all these good standards. Like, we have all these international conventions which have very good language. Then let's all translate it back to us. Let's make the government see why we need to have good animal welfare policies, okay? And then thank you for your attention, and I welcome any questions.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Judy, for that presentation, talking where we are in terms of policy concerning animal production and what is needed. I believe it's an aspect that is so much needed in that for anything to be operational and to be implementable has to be supported by strong policies. And I like how she stressed having Africa narratives, Africa-centric approaches that really speak to us. And with that, I would like to welcome any questions or comments from you so that Judy can clarify and answer to that. Thank you. Yes? Judy.
Okay, my question is, my name is Malemba Mkongo from People Daily newspaper. So my question is, you've said that most of the recommendations are from, let's call them foreign recommendations, and we need African-based recommendations and solutions. So my question is, what are some of the obstacles are African researchers facing such that we cannot have our own researchers? Because we cannot have recommendation if we don't have studies. So what are some of these challenges or obstacles African researchers are facing at the moment? Thank you.
Yeah, it's not all a walk in the park. So it would be good to know what is preventing us. I'll come to you after, Prof.
Yeah, my name is Professor Jonge from Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. Thank you, Judy, for that very insightful presentation. Mine is just a question on the African agenda, the Africa 2063, and the things we are talking about here. And I think when Africa sat and said this, they are going to be a powerhouse for the next 50 years from 2013 to 2063, did we really incorporate what we are saying today? Because if we did, and if we are going to be Africa for the future, then of course all these things must be taken into consideration. Because the things which have happened in Africa in terms of animal agriculture, and even the other agriculture, is very different from what others are telling us to do. So have we incorporated it when we are doing the African agenda? I was watching a video and the president of Rwanda, Kagame, was talking about Africans sitting in a conference and being told by Paris and England and the rest on what they are going to do about Africa. And then the African presidents themselves are not saying anything. You know, they are listening to be told what they need to do to their own problems. It is a pathetic situation. Because, like what my colleague there has asked, what are we doing? We as universities, for example, we do a lot of research, but who guides that research? What does it, is it our own indigenous issues we are solving? Or is it because the international organization has come with a problem which Africans have to sit in the lab, spend a lot of time, come with information, which is not African, which is not inherent to ourselves? So all these things we need to look at them and ask ourselves, African agenda, were we saying the things we are saying now, and did we incorporate them so that we can have Africa we need? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. So that is things to your mind. Africa Agenda 2063. Today we are in 2022. 2063 is 41 years from now. Look at your age now, add 41 years, then that will click to you why we are discussing these issues as now and what they mean in future.
Okay, my name is Willis Aduda. I come from Busia border. So my comment is on these policies that governments or convention that we sign. I think there is need to hold somebody accountable. So if it is a government ministry, somebody should be assigned task and timeline so that if the animal welfare issues that should be adopted, they are given timelines and they are held accountable so that they are achieved. Then at where I work, I engage in international trade on live animals and their byproducts. So when we are developing like import requirements for importing animals or their byproducts, we borrow a lot from the World Animal Health Terrestrial Animal Code. So I think animal welfare organization, government, they need to work closely with, now it's called WOA, so that the animal welfare regulations are strengthened. And for example, if you say now the global north are disbanding battery cages, but they are enticing Africans to take them up. You know, there are even diseases like avian influenza, swine flu, that if the import requirements are not stringent enough, we are having that risk of importing the diseases together with those equipments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daktari, for that. I'll go to him, then I'll come back.
So thank you. Thank you, Judy, for the presentation. My name is Gerard Ngao. My question was, African countries, some of them are looking west, others are looking east. And we are saying we blame it on the Bugaji community or the Bugaji society. It's not a class struggle. It's a mindset that needs to change. But how practical is it that we can stop looking east or looking west and have a paradigm shift and focus on our own and tapping the resources in our motherland, and saying that Africa is the cradle of everything, economics, social. There is this that Egypt is hosting the COP27, and it's the cradle of, they say it's this civilization. How civilization now? Yet we are looking east and west. Why can we focus on Africa, and how practical is it? Thank you.
I think that's a strong one. Judy, we'll be happy to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Judy, for the presentation. Eunice here. And let me borrow the wisdom of Professor, what he has said. And yesterday in our table, he was giving us a challenge that I've been thinking about, and I think it's something that we can take forward in terms of the research that is being done in several institutions. And maybe how can we convince our countries, our organizations, because he was giving us an example of allocating an area such as maybe the north, where we are having serious drought effect, to an institution for research. Then we see the fruits that we can get from there. Then my other question is on you've talked about working with the IGAD, AU, IBA, AU, and the rest of those organizations. So maybe how can we know that they work with member states, and these are African countries. So how can we tap into their connection to member states to make sure that these policies that we are talking about, these frameworks that we are working on, to ensure that they are working in those countries? Then another thing you told us about increase in quality and not standards. So what are the specific policies that are in existence now? And maybe what other policies do we need to put in place so that we make sure that quality goes hand in hand with the quantity? And then there is a statement you made about Africa being poor. And my question is, are we really poor, or is it the poor planning of our leaders, member states, and maybe priorities? Thank you.
Okay. No comment.
Yeah, thank you so much, Judy. My name is Kevin Lunzalu from the Kenyan Youth Biodiversity Network. When you are listing all the policies that are in play in Africa that govern farming, I was wondering the impact of such siloed policies and groups. And when you're talking about having an African narrative, how is that going to be materialized, considering that the fact that, for example, ECOWAS policies are based for the West African countries, CEMAC for the Central African, the Maghreb Union is for the North African Arab countries. So we need to maybe first think of desiloing our policies before we talk about having like a unionized African narrative.
Okay, thank you for all those questions. As Judy prepares a response, I got interested by the question that, are we Africans poor? As you know, there's a projection we are going to have economic crisis. It might be worse next year. And Africa will be hit most. And one of the key things because of that is our loans. Our loans are in USD currency, not in our local currency. Our local currency is becoming weak and weaker. And there was a lot of argument about that and how Africa sometimes becomes disadvantaged. But again, Judy, it's your question, so we'll be happy to get your thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, these are very good questions. And I'll try and answer some of them. And then I'll leave some of the questions to be answered by the professors. We have renowned people like professors, we have doctors, we have all these people. So you'll all help me answer this question. And I'll start with the research, the question from the professor. Yes, and I think this is the biggest problem when it comes to policy. Because now, are we being forward-thinking? Because right now we're talking about a policy between 2021 to 2063. And that is our issue. Already, where we are, we do not have enough research capturing our situation right now. And that's why we're saying, in terms of factory farming, are we able to correctly say that Africa is in a place where we are absorbing the practice in a way that it complies with international conventions? And so, and there's a gap, there's that specific gaps. And also, when these institutions do their research, there is no keen absorption by the communities and everyone else. And because they are funded, you know how funded projects are, even occasions we have our funded projects. When you do our fund, then do we have a professor where it talks about sharing it to the public? Because you see that's the question which comes in now. Yes, you have done all this work, even though in the organization fraternity we know, World Animal Protection has done this, Better Green has done this, African Network for Animal Welfare has done this, this organization has done this, but do we get to a position where all these organizations sit down and share their ideas and come up with concrete, specific way forward on these things? So I would say, there's a problem in terms of sharing information. Yesterday we learned about, from my group, we're talking about how Kari has been doing extensive research, but then does not reflect that down to the community. So I think we need to resolve all these problems for ourselves and try and do a lot of more sharing. Let's share more. Let's everyone, and that's what I talked about, let's bring everyone to the table. All stakeholders, researchers, community, the public themselves, and the government. Because now, if the information is only hoarded by one person, then it becomes quite hard to reflect it down. Yes, we have farmers, but farmers, they don't know where we should not use battery cages. Then they will still continually use it. And then also the government look at it in terms of economics. In terms of economic aspect of it, it's going to bring this kind of money in this short period of time. So then how can we as animal welfare organizations come up with specific research that counters the economic part? Because sometimes we end up being so emotive to the point that we are so passionate, but forget that passion sometimes does not win the argument. Because then they're coming with numbers, economies, the simple are dying because of hunger. You're just telling us, oh my gosh, animals are sentient. But now, can we come up with specific research that develops, we have so many arguments, can we come up with scientific research that can be shared with everyone, and for us to be able to be more convincing to the public? Because I think that's where now we are failing, because that specific aspect for the research is not being shared and is not being put in the correct way. And also, when it comes to this forward, so how can we use our institution right now to come up with better policies? Because you see, the bad thing about climate change is that climate change comes to bite us later, maybe in the next 5 years or 10 years. And so we might not be able to predict how it's going to affect us in the next 10 or 15 years. But now, how can we establish policies, or rather, how can we establish practices that are able to mitigate whatever we currently have? We saw COVID for the 2 years that we didn't have any activities around the world. We saw how the waters became clean. The good thing about nature, nature cleans itself. It can be vindictive, but it knows how to take care of itself. So we need to start up incorporating specific practices that are going to gear us towards that. And also we have to remember that all these small journeys, a small step takes you the whole journey. So however much we say, we might not know how it will be in those years, but at least we've made the first step. We've come up with a specific policy that at least caters for what we think is going to cater for. And so if you can say we want, it's like, no, okay, I do sometimes wildlife protection, and I think that can show exactly what I'm trying to say. You see, in 2010, Kenya, the prosecution for wildlife crime was less than 1%, if you could see the statistics. I know many of you have done in wildlife protection. But now we can see the prosecutions have increased to around 70%. You can see when courts are getting fines for 5 million, others getting life imprisonment, others 20 million, you see. So this animal welfare journey is an incremental journey. Every small step is a step towards the right direction. So right now we have this meeting here. What recommendations and what resolutions can we have? We say we want a UNEA resolution, then we have a UNEA resolution. That's the first step. So let's take every step we take as a very good step towards the right direction. We cannot say we are not there yet, and then we start, then we'll be a bit disappointed. Let's be positive, and we take everything slowly by slowly. And by that, we will see our small steps bearing fruit, okay? And then the accountability of policy. We know when it comes to policy and the laws, it's always a political endeavor. We always say we have to come up with leaders that are passionate about the environment. We had Wangari Maathai. Wangari Maathai was a very instrumental icon for which she was able to spread her message to the environment. So how can we use our voices? How can we use the voices to steer the message and change our minds? So that accountability aspect of it comes up within ourselves. Are you a person who, when you have a plastic in your bag, you throw it outside? You know, children, sometimes they really follow whatever we do. So if you take up, do you throw everywhere? Do you slaughter your chicken in front of the small kids, the five-year-old children? So we need to start being humane ourselves, because at the end of the day, accountability comes from us. Definitely we'll have to make sure that we have the low governing bodies doing that, but it needs to start with us. As a community, as an animal welfare community, how can we be more accountable and come up with specific things that make us a role model for everyone else to follow? It becomes better than that. And also when it comes to, in Kenya, when you check the prevention for cruelty laws, when you're talking about the question of the imports, that mandate is shared between the officers themselves, the vets officers, the border control, and then the police. So then, have we empowered the police people? Every day we go outside, we see how chicken are transported. Have we communicated that message to them? Have we spread the message? So then accountability starts with us. We need to come up with programs that educate and sensitize on great animal welfare practices. And with that, then they have a basis for which they can borrow from. It's like now if you go to maybe you have the African Negotiation Committee. If they do not understand or they do not know exactly why we need to conserve the environment, or we need to protect the animals, then they will not have the basis for which they should base their arguments on. You get? So we need to come up with, we need to continually, let's not get tired. Let's have these programs. Let's continually educate. Because policy comes up from educated people. We need to educate people first. They understand, then they have a basis for which they can base their policy on. Okay? And then, yes, that's a very, you asked if Africa is poor. Okay, actually, that's a very political question. It can raise very many debates. Actually, we can even talk about that topic for a whole year. But in regards to our specific conversation here, let's talk about Africa in terms of availability of food. Availability of food, availability of resources, availability of technology. And with this, then, we'll now be able to see what exactly we're talking about in this particular situation. And also with the political sector, or the international political agenda, we've continually been made to believe that Africa has to depend on the West for it to make all their functions work. It comes with colonialism, and it's still embedded in our systems. It's still embedded in our blood system in a way that we are still in the mindset for which that we cannot do this until a white person comes and tells us what we're supposed to be doing. So then, those specific things, is Africa poor? Does Africa have resources? We have all the minerals in the world. They all come to Africa to take the minerals. But then again, going back to what I said, it's a political statement. And so we may not be able to answer it at this forum, but let's see it in terms of the food insecurity aspect of it, in terms of this conversation. There's still a lot of inaccessibility of people to access food. Like Rwanda, if I was to ask you a question, how many eggs do you think a Ugandan would eat? Who knows? The per capita intake of eggs, how many do you think they are? Who knows? Maybe take a wild guess. Would you guess? Huh? You see? 100 eggs. Another person? She said 100. How many eggs do you think an average Rwandan person takes every year? Just take a wild guess. Don't be shy, just say. Huh? How many, Professor? 150, you said 100. Had another 20. Okay, another person? Okay, see, these are very good guesses, but you're all wrong, because it's only 1 egg per year. 1 egg, because of the, yes. And if you see, and if you check the stunting growth of Rwanda, it ranks number 1 in the whole world. You can imagine. That's what I'm trying to just say in terms of food insecurity. Yes, we can say Kenya at least we take a lot of eggs, but Rwanda is just 1. And so even the government has come up with these specific programs for which they make sure that every family is able to get a chicken to sustain their own food. Children they have already an issue of certain growth, you see. So, and that is what I'm trying to talk about in terms of the reality of Africa. Yes, we are not poor, but we have to be very realistic on whatever is happening in our country, in our continent. And so by having this understanding, then able to come up with a food system for which is able to accommodate everyone, regardless of economic status, to access all these options, okay? Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. In terms of that question for poor, we have to be very realistic and we have to talk as it is. And so we come up with specific ways for which we ensure there's availability of proteins, because protein at the end of the day, it helps in development of children, okay, with people and gives us energy, okay? And then African researchers' problems. The biggest problem we have as African researchers is definitely funding. Because coming back to the same question, is Africa poor? Do we need money to go research, or we need money to go eat? Sometimes the priorities, sometimes they become a bit, the priorities, we have to weigh our options. You see, do we need, okay, if I was to give you 10,000 shillings and you're from the Kijiji, your first thing will be like, oh yeah, let me go buy a cow. Let me go buy a chicken. You see, so we have to be, and when it comes to education is a very good thing that we need to introduce in our communities, but it's still not, it has not really penetrated to every point of the continent. And so that's our biggest problem. It's in terms of funding. Another one is research sharing. Because we talked about earlier, is that every person is doing a lot of work being done, but is it being shared by everyone? You see, that's another question. That's another issue that we have. And so if you create a platform for which you can have continuous sharing and continuous funding of these things, then able to get a specific result. At the end of the day, we need an African narrative. We need to change our mindset that we have to be dependent on the global north. We need to depend on ourselves because our problems have our own solutions. Okay? Yeah, and then in terms of increase of quantity and quality. Yeah, okay. When it is organizations like African Union, AU, IBA, IGAD, we have ECOWAS, we have EU, the East African community. They all come up with specific, and you remember, all these, let's not forget, all these international organizations are made up of states. All these states in these blocks, all these organizations in these blocks, they're made up by the states, the member states of these blocks, okay? We have ECOWAS, we have all the states in the region. We have SADC in the regional, Southern Africa, East Africa. So whatever policies they make, they breed from their own states. And always when you do a treaty, international law, it comes up with it has to be done, it brings about to the will of the states, okay? So even before we proceed, just remember that every framework that is made by this international organization, they come up from the states. Even the UNIA resolution, it came up from the states. You saw countries ticking on it. All of them, they are bred by the states. And that has always shown very good political will. But now the problem now comes in is the translation. We see how do we make laws by ratification, where once an international convention or framework has been introduced to the international community, the states have to embrace it by ratification, okay? And treaty, so that treaty ratification and accession, okay? So that specific process, now that's where now African states now lag behind. And so us as the movement, we need to continually do legislative drives. We need to show the importance of having specific translation of such laws into our municipal laws, okay? Because all these organizations themselves, they come from the member states. Then now the member state needs to show the political will by embracing it. But the good thing about our constitution is actually a very powerful constitution. Which talks about customs and declaration, and Article 2, which talks about any accepted convention or any accepted practice, general practice by the international community, is automatically becomes the law. So as the animal welfare fraternity, we are able to compel and use those internationally accepted frameworks and conventions into our law. And that is how we automatically incorporated CITES in our laws. You know CITES? That is how we are able to incorporate all this, the Biodiversity Convention, remember it? The Transboundary Convention, you see? So we don't have to take it as it is, like we say we have CITES, or we have we already automatically, by virtue of our constitution, incorporate it into our laws. So there's no need of panicking, because we already subscribe to these kind of conventions. And that's one thing that we need to always remember. And that's why we always told that let's encourage ourselves. Like international organizations like World Animal Protection, we have we have all Brighter Green, they have a status in negotiations, okay? Then let's play our part in these negotiations. Let's bring our voice. Let's be the people who are passing on the message in terms of animal welfare, okay? Yeah, I think that's all the questions. Apart from now, maybe the increase in quantity and quality. How can we ensure that increase in quantity reflects in quality? There's such a question. We're talking about how can you make sure that whatever we're getting in quantity complies with the international standards. Then that's for us to ensure that that happens. Because as a community, we need to continually educate on animal welfare practices. And so with that then, the policymakers will be able to ensure that however much they translate. And you remember, even on this convention, even the IGAD and the ECOWAS and the CADP talks about the animal diseases, if you can remember. So it talks about however much you want to increase the quantity, we have to make sure that it's on quality. So it has to ensure that we have practices that does not increase transboundary diseases from moving. Okay? So we still have to, and let's look at all these laws in as a complementary way, that everyone, each law builds on the other. I think those are the questions from the room. Maybe in case anyone has another point of clarification. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Judy, for those responses. And again, I believe it's a discussion that does not end here. And thank you to the online participants. I have two comments from Dr. Mwenda Mbaka. He says, Africa member states are members of World Organization for Animal Health, that is OIE, and therefore they need to be proactive in animal welfare standards settings as well as other standards. So basically he's calling us, because we have presence in those global bodies, we must continue to push Africa-centric asks based in our setting and standards so that they are able to speak to us. Then the other comment is he refers to the gap, the question about gap that was raised. And he says the question about gaps that cause Africa to copy standards from other parts of the world. That raises the need for a formal study to establish those gaps, kazi kwa World Animal Protection and other organizations to conduct the research. So he's calling upon us not to just be there and say anyway, because it's here, we just adopt it. Let's be proactive in contributing to those global discussions and to ensure we push Africa agenda in those high-level panel discussions. So thank you so much, Judy, for taking us through policy environment, and thank you, our online participants. Professor, he still has more information regarding Africa being regarded as poor. And he wants to make a comment about that, and I request our IT guys to project something. Then I'll call Professor to come and speak about that. Karibu. So, just a minute, yes? Oh, okay. You can stand there. Stand there.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to take the podium, really, but I just wanted to bring to the attention of the question of whether Africa is poor. And that brought to my thinking on an article I read some time back. And a British parliamentarian visited Africa and went back to Britain, and he reported, as you can see on the screens. And I want us to ask ourselves whether we are poor. And he says, I have traveled across length and breadth of Africa, and I have not seen one person who is a beggar. That was in 1836. Who is a thief? Such wealth I have seen in this country such high moral values, people of such caliber, that I do not think we would ever conquer this country. Remember that time Africa was just like one country. Their vision, their thinking was Africa was just one country. And unless we break the very backbone of this nation, I don't want to read about the rest. I wanted us to ask ourselves, is Africa poor? And if you read there below, you will see why we are poor. I don't want to say why we are poor, but that will answer why we are poor. Because, and Judah has alluded to this, is that, these things come, they are well documented, and we do what these people want. Some time back, I visited Australia on tour of duty, and I noted that one of their best, Australia is one of the best meat exporters to Japan. And after some consultation, discussion, do you know the animal they call Brahman is actually our African zebu. And it produces the best meat because Australia is the best beef exporter to Japan, the best quality meat. What happened? And here we sit and then, of course, condemn our zebu, it is a poor, it does not produce, but they are saying they stole our indigenous animal and they are now saying it is the best. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think the question is our research, she has alluded to it, our own problem, homegrown, home sorted out in terms of research, so that we can say African Agenda 2063 is talking about ourselves and having our framework as a continent which is going to be on itself and feeding its people. Thank you very much. You can continue reading this and tell me whether Africa is poor. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, for that information and the reflection of this parliamentarian who visited Africa on 2nd February of 1835. Dr. Willis, sorry I cut you short. I don't know. No, you still wish to make that comment?
Yes, a brief comment on, now there's a new concept when coming up with or formulating new policies. It's called policy prioritization through value chain analysis. That our policymakers, they are supposed to be educated about. For example, now if you consider like factory farming, and now we are saying that our focus should be plant source proteins. There should be research that is done so that these heads of government or policymakers, they are presented with facts and they know which value chains they are supposed to maybe pump money and support. Just that was what I intend to say.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hari, for that comment. And I do recognize that it's a comment that you put yesterday, and it was positively taken by the team here. So it's something that we look forward to working on. When Judy was presenting, she mentioned about Wangari Maathai. I'm very sure she's a lady we are proud of as Africans, being a Nobel Prize winner. And it reminded me of the story of hummingbird, which I believe most of us connect to that. There was this forest fire. Other animals came out. They were shocked. They were amazed what is happening. But the hummingbird started fetching water with a beak as little as it is from the river, trying to put down the fire. Then the big animals, such as elephants, who have trunks and muscles to carry a sensible amount of water, were like, what do you think you're doing? but the hummingbird said, I'm doing the best I can. I bring that story because it really connects to what we are discussing here today. We are discussing about global food systems, which is quite big, a big subject by its own right. We are talking about climate change, discussion that started way long time ago, and a lesson to learn. A few years ago, even the developing nations could not agree with the fact that there's climate change. They were saying, you are just talking about climate change, there's nothing about that. But those who were using data to advise them never gave up. They continued campaigning about climate change. And you can see currently all the nations are coming up with measures to mitigate climate change. So that tells you the small effort that you're doing, the small, as we might look here, trying to engage two big subjects. You might think you're not doing big enough, but be assured you're doing enough to have that change you're looking for in the future. With that, I'd like to thank our online participants. They have been with us since morning and as well active. You have seen many questions that they have been raising here. And I'd like to inform them that this comes to an end to our presentations for this summit. We really appreciate their support yesterday and today. And as I mentioned, the key thing is to come up with joint statement targeting COP27, which will be held here in Africa, Egypt. And we want this statement to be owned collectively by all of us. We want it to speak for Africans, by Africans, to address African issues and come up with resolutions that really speak to our problems. We will share that joint statement. I hope you have shared your contact addresses and the organizations that you are coming from, and you'll be able to share a draft copy with that, of that statement to get your comments when that is ready. So thank you again, online participants, for being with us. Much appreciated.